Sergei Aleshkov. Chapter 1. Forest Home. My name is Sergei Aleshkov. Born in 1936 in Grin, Kaluga Oblast, Soviet Union, I lived deep inside a vast forest. Tall trees, like giants reaching for the sky, stood sentinel around our little wooden house. Sunlight dappled through the leaves, painting the forest floor with a mosaic of light and shadow. Here, in this verdant world, I lived a happy life with Mama and my little brother, Petya. Though Papa wasn't with us anymore, Mama assured me he watched over us from the twinkling constellation above. The forest is my best friend. Every day, Petya and I race through the tall trees, climb on sturdy branches, and jump over fallen logs. We chase colorful butterflies that flutter among the flowers, and watch tiny birds build their nests in the branches. Sometimes, Mama sits by the stream and sings us songs. Her voice is sweet like the bird song, and her stories are filled with brave heroes and magical creatures. They make my heart race and my mind wander to faraway lands filled with adventure. One sunny afternoon, everything changed. Strange men walked into our peaceful forest. They wore clothes that looked different from ours, and they carried big, heavy things that made loud noises. Mama's face turned pale, and her eyes filled with worry. She pulled Petya and me close and hid us behind a giant oak tree. The strange men shouted in a language I didn't understand, their faces filled with anger. My heart pounded in my chest, and I held Petya tight, not knowing what was happening. Days turned into weeks. The strange men didn't leave. They chopped down trees with loud, screeching machines, and the forest didn't feel safe anymore. Mama whispered to us about a big war happening far away, a terrible fight between countries. She called the strange men Germans, bad people who wanted to hurt our land. We didn't see them often, but Mama's worry hung heavy in the air. Then, one cold morning, the strange men came to our house. They shouted for Mama, making Petya cry. Mama told us to hide, but the men found us easily. They took Mama and a scared Petya outside. I peeked through a crack in the window, my heart pounding like a drum. The strange men pointed their loud, heavy things at them. Mama screamed a word I didn't know. Then there was a loud bang. Tears blurred my vision as I ran outside. But it was too late. Mama and Petya were gone. The world seemed upside down, and a terrible pain filled my stomach. Alone and scared, I wandered through the forest, not knowing where to go or what to do. Days passed in a blur, my stomach growling with hunger and my heart filled with fear. Then, from a distance, I saw men dressed in green uniforms, different from the Germans. They looked kind, and they gave me food and water when I approached them, their faces filled with concern. They asked my name, and in a shaky voice, I whispered, "Sergei." They took me with them, offering me a sliver of hope in that dark time. Chapter 2. Brothers in Arms. Days turned into weeks as I traveled with the kind soldiers in green. They were strong and brave, fighting against the bad Germans who had taken everything from me. Their leader, Captain Medvedev, was a tall man with a strong voice and kind eyes. When he saw the sadness in my eyes, he pulled me close and hugged me gently. He, too, had lost loved ones to the war, a pain etched deep on his face. Captain Medvedev told me stories about the war, about fighting for our country, Russia, against the German invaders. He said I was brave for surviving alone for so long, and that my courage would be an asset. He asked if I wanted to stay with them, to be part of their team. With nowhere else to go, I nodded, a small spark of hope igniting in my chest. These soldiers became my new family. They taught me everything they knew about using a gun, how to be strong and disciplined, how to move silently through the forest, and how to hide from the enemy. They called me Soldier Boy because even though I was small, I showed a fierce determination in my heart. I learned to follow orders quickly, to crawl on the ground without making a sound, and to camouflage myself with leaves and branches. At night, when the soldiers gathered around a crackling fire, I would listen to them talk about their homes and families. Some missed their wives and children, others their pets or favorite foods. We all missed the peace and quiet of life before the war. The war songs they sang were sad and powerful, telling stories of loss and longing for home. Sometimes, I missed Mama and Petya so much it felt like my heart would break. I would look up at the sky, searching for familiar constellations, hoping that somehow, from beyond the stars, they were watching over me. One day, Captain Medvedev gathered us for a serious talk. His face was grim, and his voice low. He told us that the Germans were getting closer, and a big battle was coming soon. We trained even harder, practicing attack formations and battle tactics. Fear gnawed at my stomach, but the thought of fighting the Germans, the people who took Mama and Petya, filled me with a fierce determination. The night before the battle, I couldn't sleep. Images of the strange men and Mama's scream played over and over in my mind. I snuck out of the camp and sat by the river, staring at the reflection of the moon on the water. A rough hand landed on my shoulder. It was Captain Medvedev, his eyes filled with understanding. He sat beside me and told me that war is a terrible thing, that it takes away the best things in life. But he also said that sometimes, fighting is the only way to protect what you love, your family, your home, your country. He squeezed my shoulder gently. Tomorrow, soldier boy, we fight for all those things. The next morning, the forest echoed with the sounds of war. It was loud and scary, unlike anything I had ever experienced. Booms and bangs filled the air, shaking the ground beneath our feet. Soldiers yelled commands, their faces tight with concentration. The Germans seemed like a dark, angry storm, but we fought back with everything we had. Captain Medvedev's instructions were clear and steady, a guiding light in the chaos. I followed them, firing my gun, dodging bullets, and pushing through the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. The battle raged for hours, a blur of smoke, noise, and confusion. Soldiers fell around me, some wounded, others never to rise again. Tears streamed down my face, the pain of war raw and undeniable. But amidst the chaos, I remembered what Captain Medvedev said about fighting for what we loved. It gave me a surge of strength to keep going, to push forward against the enemy. Finally, as the sun began to set, the shooting stopped. Captain Medvedev, his face grim and covered in dirt, announced that the Germans had retreated. We had won the battle, but at a terrible cost. Many of our soldiers were injured, and the forest floor was littered with the fallen. A heavy silence descended, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the chirping of birds returning to the quiet forest. Chapter 3. Soldier Boy. The victory at the battle was bittersweet. We chased the Germans back, but the cost was high. Many brave soldiers lay wounded, their faces pale and bodies weak. The forest floor, once filled with the chirping of birds, became heavy with silence broken only by the moans of the injured. We spent the next few days tending to the wounded and burying our fallen comrades. Tears flowed freely, mixing with the dirt and smoke that clung to our clothes. Captain Medvedev, though strong, carried the weight of the battle heavily. He walked with a deeper hunch, and his eyes seemed clouded with sadness. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder one evening, his voice husky. "War is a cruel thing, soldier boy," he said. "It takes the best from us and leaves only scars." I understood. Though young, the war had already stolen my childhood and left scars on my heart. After a few days, we said goodbye to the place where so many had fallen. Captain explained that we would push the Germans further back, closer to their own land. Packing our meager belongings, we set off on a long journey. We walked for days, sometimes weeks, through forests, fields, and across small villages. Our feet grew tired, our stomachs rumbled with hunger, and our clothes became ragged and dirty. But we kept moving, driven by the determination to win the war and return home someday. Along the way, we encountered others affected by the war. We passed through villages burned to the ground, their people scared and displaced. Women cried for lost husbands and sons, and children wandered with lost eyes, clutching their few remaining possessions. The sight filled me with a deep anger at the Germans, a renewed desire to fight for a future free from their cruelty. One evening, we camped by a small river, the sound of rushing water filling the air. Huddled around a crackling fire, soldiers shared stories of their homes. Captain Medvedev spoke of his wife, Anna, a baker with the kindest smile. He described their cozy little house and the smell of fresh bread that always filled the air. The other soldiers spoke of their families and farms, their voices filled with a deep longing. Their stories made me ache for Mama and Petya. I missed their laughter, the warmth of our little house, and the feeling of Mama's hand in mine. Days turned into weeks, and the landscape changed. We moved closer to bigger towns and cities, signs that the war was intensifying. We saw more soldiers, both young and old, joining the fight. We received new supplies and better weapons, a glimmer of hope in the face of the ongoing struggle. One night, Captain Medvedev gathered us around the fire. His face was etched with worry, but his voice remained firm. Soon, he announced, "We will fight for a major city, a turning point in the war. It will be a difficult battle, but victory will bring us closer to ending this madness." He looked at me, his gaze holding a mixture of concern and pride. "You've proven yourself, soldier boy. You're brave and resourceful. But remember, war is no place for a child. It's dangerous and heartbreaking." My heart pounded in my chest. Captain Medvedev's words surprised me. What did he mean? I was a soldier, wasn't I? I had fought alongside them, followed orders, and even fired my gun. Did he think I was too young? Fear crept in, a cold snake slithering down my spine. Captain Medvedev continued, I found a kind woman with 2 young children not far from here. They lost their father in the war and need a helping hand. They can offer you a safe place to stay, away from the dangers of the front lines. My mind raced. The idea of a safe place, a family, was tempting, but I also felt a sense of loyalty to my fellow soldiers, to Captain Medvedev, and to the fight against the Germans. Chapter 4. The Battle Expand. The news about leaving the soldiers hit me like a ton of bricks. Captain Medvedev's words played on repeat in my head. A safe place, a family, away from the whole war mess. It seemed unreal, like something out of a storybook, compared to the rough life of battles and sleeping on the ground. But then again, Mama and Petya popped into my mind. Maybe, with this family, I could feel a little like myself again. You know, not just soldier boy. Days flew by in a blur as we got closer to the big city Captain Medvedev talked about. You could practically feel the tension in the air. We heard stories about crazy fighting happening there, the Germans putting up a tough fight. Smoke filled the sky, and the ground rumbled with explosions far away, a constant reminder of the battle raging ahead. Finally, we reached a small village on the city's edge. The houses looked beat up, some with busted windows and roofs patched with whatever they could find. People moved slow and quiet, worry etched on their faces. Captain introduced me to a lady named Anya. She had kind eyes and a warm smile, even though you could see sadness lines all around them. Her kids, Nadia, a girl a bit older than me, and a little rascal named Dmitri, younger than Petya, peeked out from behind her legs, shy as can be. Anya offered me some food and a place to crash. The simple meal of warm stew and bread tasted like heaven after days of boring rations and hard biscuits. Nadia and Dmitri warmed up to me slowly, even though they were a little suspicious at first. We'd play hide and seek in the village square, their laughter a sweet sound in this war-torn world. For a few days, things felt almost normal. I helped Anya with chores, played with the kids, and slept in a real bed at night, not on the ground. But the war clouds hung heavy overhead. Every night, the city glowed orange from distant fires, and the rumble of explosions became our everyday background noise. News about the battle trickled into the village, whispers of heavy losses on both sides. One morning, a soldier rode in on a horse, his face grim. He talked in hushed tones with Captain Medvedev. Then the captain turned to me, his face full of worry. "The battle for the city's getting super bad, soldier boy," he said. "The Germans are tough, and we need all the help we can get." My heart sank. Part of me, the part that got used to the quiet life in the village, wanted to stay. But the other part, the soldier part fueled by the need to fight back against the Germans who took everything from me, burned with a fierce fire to help. It was a confusing mess of fear and determination. Looking at Captain Medvedev, I saw the same determination in his eyes, the same feeling burning inside me. "I'm coming with you," I blurted out before I could even think twice. Captain Medvedev looked surprised. Then a smile broke through the worry on his face. He patted my shoulder. "I knew you had it in you, soldier boy. But remember, this ain't no game. It's gonna be rough out there." I nodded, my heart pounding like a drum solo. Fear mixed with a weird kind of excitement, a need to prove myself, to fight alongside the soldiers who became my family. The trip back to the front lines felt different this time. The village, once a safe haven, now seemed fragile and vulnerable. Saying goodbye to Anya, Nadia, and Dmitri filled me with sadness. I hugged them tight, promising to write if I could. Their small faces, filled with worry and fear, were a harsh reminder of the war's impact on everyone, not just soldiers. Back with the soldiers, the mood was tense. You could cut the air with a knife, everyone getting ready for a fight unlike any other. Captain Medvedev gave us a pep talk, his voice strong and steady. He talked about fighting for our homes, for our loved ones, for a future where the Germans wouldn't be messing things up. His words hit me deep, fueling the fire of determination in my heart, pushing aside the fear that wouldn't quite leave. The city loomed ahead, a dark shape against the smoke-filled sky. As we got closer, the sounds of war grew louder. Cannons booming, guns rattling, the screams of wounded soldiers. Fear threatened to swallow me whole, but I clenched my fists and focused on what I had to do. Chapter 5: Journey East. The battle for the big city was a monstrous beast, unlike anything I had ever experienced. The ground trembled with every explosion, the air thick with smoke and the metallic tang of blood. Screams of soldiers, both friend and foe, filled the air, a constant reminder of the brutal fight unfolding around us. Captain Medvedev's orders cut through the chaos. We moved as one unit, following his instructions with precision drilled into us during training. We crawled through mud, dodged flying bullets, and returned fire with everything we had. The air crackled with a terrifying energy, a deadly dance between life and death. Days blurred into nights. We fought through bombed-out buildings, streets choked with rubble, and parks turned into battlefields. Hunger gnawed at my stomach. Sleep was a precious commodity snatched in stolen moments between attacks. My small stature, once a disadvantage, became an advantage as I squeezed through tight spaces and darted between cover unseen. But the cost of victory was high. Every day, soldiers fell beside me. Some injuries were gruesome, the sight forever etched in my memory. The camaraderie that had brought us together was laced with a deep sadness, the weight of loss heavier with each passing day. The battle wasn't just about fighting soldiers. It was a fight against the despair that threatened to consume us. We sang folk songs at night, huddled around flickering fires, the melodies a fragile shield against the surrounding darkness. We shared stories of home, of loved ones, of a future free from war. These stories, even the funny ones, held a bittersweet tinge, a reminder of what we were fighting for. One evening, during a brief lull in the fighting, Captain Medvedev found me staring at the distant horizon. His face, usually stoic, held a deep weariness. "War changes us, soldier boy," he said, his voice raspy. "It takes a piece of your innocence, leaves scars both on the body and soul." I nodded silently, the truth of his words hitting me hard. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the tide began to turn. With each inch of ground we gained, the Germans pushed back. The city became a ghost town, buildings reduced to skeletal remains, streets deserted and silent except for the ever-present echoes of war. One particularly brutal day, while clearing a building, we found a group of civilians hiding in the basement. A frail old woman, a young mother clutching a crying baby, and a few scared children. Their terrified faces were a stark reminder of the war's toll on innocent people. We gave them what little food and water we had, promising to get them somewhere safe when the fighting stopped. Their fear filled me with a renewed determination. We fought not just for ourselves, but for all the people who had lost their homes, their families, their peaceful lives. The image of those scared faces propelled me forward, a silent promise to push back the darkness and see the light of peace again. As weeks turned into months, the landscape began to change. We moved out of the devastated city and into rolling hills and open fields. The air felt cleaner, the explosions less frequent. News came that the Germans were retreating on a broad front. A flicker of hope, long extinguished, sparked back to life in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, the war was nearing its end. One sunny afternoon, Captain Medvedev called us together. His face, though still etched with the lines of war, held a hint of relief. "We've pushed the Germans far, comrades," he announced. "The war isn't over yet, but we're getting closer to victory." He looked at me, a warm smile replacing the usual stern expression. "You fought bravely, soldier boy. You've earned your place among us." The news filled me with a mix of emotions. Pride at being recognized by Captain Medvedev, relief that the war seemed to be heading towards an end, and a deep longing for a life beyond the battlefield. Chapter 6. A New Hope. Months turned into a year. The war dragged on, but the momentum had shifted. We pushed the Germans further east, reclaiming towns and villages with each battle. The landscape changed dramatically, lush forests giving way to vast, open plains. The air grew colder, and snow dusted the ground in the mornings. Though the fighting continued, hope blossomed in our hearts. We encountered more and more civilians who hadn't been touched by the war's brutality. They cheered us on, offering food and shelter. Their gratitude fueled our determination, reminding us why we fought. One day, while clearing a small village, we stumbled upon a group of children playing in the ruins of a school. Their clothes were patched and worn, but their faces held a spark of joy, a stark contrast to the fear we had seen so often. Captain Medvedev knelt beside a little girl with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile. He offered her a piece of chocolate, a rare treat these days. Her giggle filled the air, a melody sweeter than any song. Looking at those children, innocent and hopeful, it hit me. The war might be far from over, but there was still beauty and laughter in the world. We fought not just to win, but to rebuild, to create a future where children could play without fear. One evening, Captain Medvedev shared news around the campfire. We were approaching a large city, a key stronghold for the Germans. Taking it would be a critical victory, but it wouldn't be easy. The Germans would fight hard to defend it. The following days were filled with intense training. We practiced complex maneuvers, learned new strategies, and prepared ourselves for the toughest battle yet. Captain Medvedev seemed to carry a heavier burden than usual. The weight of leadership, the responsibility for so many lives, etched a new kind of worry on his face. The assault on the city was a whirlwind of chaos. Buildings crumbled under heavy shelling, streets became battlegrounds, and the air throbbed with the relentless roar of gunfire. We fought with a fierce determination, fueled by the hope of a final victory. Days bled into nights, sleep stolen between moments of fighting. Hunger gnawed at our bellies, and exhaustion threatened to consume us. But we pushed forward, each soldier drawing strength from the one beside them. We fought for our comrades who fell, for the families waiting back home, for a future where peace would finally reign. Finally, after days of relentless fighting, the tide turned. We breached the city's defenses, pushing the Germans back street by street. The streets echoed with cheers of victory mixed with the moans of the wounded. But the celebration was short-lived. The Germans launched a desperate counterattack, forcing us back into a bloody stalemate. The final battle raged for days. It seemed like every corner held a hidden enemy, every step a gamble between life and death. Captain Medvedev, ever the leader, directed our movements with unwavering courage. But in the heat of the battle, I lost sight of him amidst the smoke and confusion. Panic welled up within me, the fear of being separated, of losing my only family in this war. But I forced myself to focus, to fight on. Every step forward, every German soldier I disarmed, brought me closer to finding Captain Medvedev. Hours later, the gunfire began to die down. Exhausted but alive, we surveyed the battlefield. The Germans were retreating, leaving behind a city battered but free. Relief washed over me, a tidal wave of emotion that swept away the fear and fatigue. But amidst the victory celebrations, a deep worry gnawed at me. Where was Captain Medvedev? I searched frantically through the rubble-strewn streets, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, I found him lying behind a fallen wall, his face pale with pain. A wave of dread crashed over me. I rushed to his side, fear choking my voice. "Captain," I cried. He opened his eyes, a weak smile gracing his lips. "There you are, soldier boy," he rasped. "You fought bravely." Relief washed over me, mingled with a new fear. We managed to get Captain Medvedev to a field hospital. The doctors treated him, but his injury was severe. He lay unconscious for days, his life hanging by a thread. I stayed by his side, clinging to the hope that he would pull through. One morning, Captain Medvedev opened his eyes. A weak smile played on his lips as he saw me. "Victory, soldier boy," he rasped, his voice weak. "We won." A tear rolled down my cheek, a mix of relief and sadness. We had won, but the cost had been high. Days turned into weeks. Captain Medvedev recovered slowly, but his war days were over. He spoke of returning home, of rebuilding his life. A bittersweet feeling filled me. I was happy for him, but also scared of facing the future without.